webinar. My name is Ted Warner with the Texas Library Association, and this is the presentation, The Power of Positive Conflict Resolution with Melinda Stallings. She is an industrial organizational psychologist dedicated to enabling the greatness in individuals. She believes that incredible things can happen professionally and personally when an individual discovers what they are capable of. Her goal in each of her presentations, such as a keynote, a breakout session at a conference, a seminar, or webinars like today, is to assist people in discovering and using their inherent talents. She has over 17 years of experience in organizational development. She's a fellow with the American Psychological Association, a senior professional in human resources, which is what that SPHR stands for at the end of her name, and she's also a credentialed mediator. She is committed to living a positive life, and her now adds author to her credentials, as The Power of Positive Conflict Resolution is actually a book due to be released on June 5th. So you are getting a special preview of this content. She has special affinity for libraries and librarians, and she most recently developed a leadership program called Excellence in Library Leadership for the MD Anderson Library faculty at the University of Houston. And of course, they are all colleagues of ours. We know that group very well. Well, welcome, Melinda. We are so proud to have you here today, and please continue.
All right. Thank you, Ted. I am really delighted to be here with you all. I love the interaction, so I know that this is going to be really exciting for me. Let me just tell you a little bit of a story. The very first group that I ever worked with in my role as a training and development, organizational development specialist was a library. And we did some team building. So when I say I have a special affinity for you all, I really do. And I really love working with librarians and in the library because you all ask these great questions and because you always want to learn. And so that's right after my own heart. So today, let me just go ahead and launch on in. We're going to take you to the power of positive conflict resolution. And so I think what happens is people often say conflict resolution, oh gosh, um, how are we ever going to get through it? But what I like to think about is that we have power when we think in the positive. And you heard in my bio that I am committed to living a positive life, and I truly am. And I've had people say, well, that's a little bit of a fluff, don't you think? This positive. And so when I go into major corporations and I've worked with Fortune 100 companies to individuals, I'll ask the individuals, well, let me just ask this question. Would you prefer to see positive return on investment or negative return on investment? Would you prefer to see positive work relationships or negative work relationships? So it kind of gets their attention real fast. So, all of that being said, we're going to go through, and I hope to leave some time at the end for questions. If you have a question that you would like to type in, please don't hesitate to do so. And if we can stop at that point in time and address them, we will. But more than likely, what we'll do is kind of hold on to them. So here we go. So, at the conclusion of this session, I have a couple of goals in mind for you. And the first one is that I just want you to reduce conflict in your life. Conflict occurs not only externally, but also internally. I call it the hamsters in the head effect, where one hamster jumps on and then it begins to run on the wheel. And so I want to give you some tools that you can actually use to reduce the conflict in your life. I want you to have more positive interactions. I think that inherently people are good and that we want to do the right thing. And so we want to have positive interactions. It's just that sometimes situations get in the way. And finally, I want you to evolve. And it's just like learning how to ride a bicycle. When you were a child, you didn't automatically get on a two-wheel bicycle and ride. Well, I did have one person who told me that they did that, which I thought they were pretty amazing. But what we did first was that we started with a tricycle, and then we went to a bike that had training wheels, and then soon enough we were able to drop our training wheels, and then before you knew it, hey, we were riding without hands, right? So it's the same kind of thing with using this approach, and I call it um, how to take any situation from breakdown to breakthrough in 8 simple steps. And if you can spell the word positive, you can certainly move through the steps. All right, so I hope these will be your goals as well. So I've outlined for you what the power of positive approach is really all about. And it just so happens that the power of positive conflict resolution is the first book that I've written, but there will be a series of books utilizing the power of positive approach to change, to communication, to team building, because as you'll be able to see, it's applicable in all of those areas. So just to give you a brief rundown, you can read them, but P is for people, personality, and perception. O is open objectivity, and one that I've actually been thinking about a little bit more, maybe this is for the second edition, is ownership, because within that open objectivity, we also need to take ownership in some situations. S is our stakeholders and our success strategies. I is the information and imaging, and this is one of my favorite parts, and so we'll talk a bit about that. T is for trust, talk, and transact. And I implement and involve. V, verify. And E, of course, evolve, which is what I'd like for you to do. And you do that through encouraging and educating other people. Getting my bearings with these buttons, so bear with me. So let's just launch right into it. The major reason that we have conflict is because of people. As I said earlier, we've got internal conflict, but we also have that conflict because we have individuals who see the world differently than we do. And that's neither right nor wrong. It is what it is. And oftentimes, though, we make that conflict into being I'm right and you're wrong, or vice versa, when what we need to do is just realize that people are being who they are. Um, the remember your insights on the personality part. I don't know how many of you all have done any type of personality work. I use insights, and some of you all will relate to this. There's also DISC and MBTI and a bevy of other instruments that can be used. And I'll give you an opportunity to kind of explore your personality here in just a moment. But personality has a large part to do with how we deal with conflict. Uh, Simply personality differences. I get this a lot when I'm conducting seminars, when I ask for people what are their expectations, what is it they'd like to address in the seminar, and oftentimes it comes up, how do I deal with different personalities? And then the final P is perception, and it's the world according to us. We see the world as we know it to be, and we use those perceptions as maps, as paradigms. And so our perception can be totally different of someone that we're dealing with, but it can have a major impact as to whether we clarify what the perceptions are or not when it comes to conflict. So I promised you that I would give you an opportunity to kind of take a look at your personality type. And so what you're going to see in the next slide is what your style preference is. And so here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Just take a moment and look through those descriptor words and figure out which of those 4 areas would represent what you think to be your general style. And certainly, this is a very cursory look at your personality style preference, but which of those 4 are you? And then we've got a little poll, and so I'd like for you to just go ahead and, after you've decided, go ahead and vote which type best reflects who you are. And I suppose that I should scroll to the next so you'll know what those categories actually are. So if you were in the first quadrant, the top left quadrant, thinking extrovert, top right quadrant, thinking introvert, bottom left quadrant, feeling extrovert, and I apologize you can't see the lettering, but it is feeling introvert on the bottom right quadrant. Okay, give it just a couple more seconds. Very good.
This is interesting, Melinda. There's a definite trend.
Yes, it is. Oh, Emily, that's very good. You don't need to change anything about you. You're whole and complete just as you are. So let's discuss this a little bit. It looks like everybody's pretty much in decided, which quadrant they're in. And so I want you to think about what your role is, and not to. Yes, of course, Carolyn would be delighted to show the quadrants again. All right, going back, everyone. Next time we'll split screen that. Thank you for that. Without being stereotypical, I just want you to think about the role that you play. And as a librarian, as Ted alluded to, this is interesting. We're beginning to see a pattern, and in all of the libraries that I've worked in, this is pretty much the pattern that we see break out. The majority of individuals fall within that introverted category, and then of course others within the extroverted category. Let me talk with you just a little bit for those of you who do not have, yes, of course, Nancy, many of us are a mix, and we have all four of those qualities at all time. It's just that we will have a preference, if you will, and it will come out naturally, and it will come out in stress situations as well. So let me just talk a little bit about each of those categories. If you are a thinking extrovert, the people on the left hand, let me just break down, first of all, generalize. The people on the left hand side of the screen, the extroverts, are those individuals who like to get things done with and through other individuals. So they like to be in the middle of things. They are really good at having multiple things going on at one time. People who are on the right hand side of the screen are the introverts, and they're individuals who prefer to work either individually or in small groups. That's where they feel most productive. Doesn't mean that they don't like to be in groups, but they feel more comfortable in the smaller groups or one on one. If you are on the top half of the slide, the red or the blue, that's the thinking half of the slide. Now that doesn't mean that the bottom half doesn't think. It means that the top half bases decisions on facts and figures and tangible data, things that they can actually say, okay, here's the proof. The bottom half of the slide is the feeling or the intuitive half of the slide, and that doesn't mean that the top half doesn't feel. It means that those individuals at the bottom typically make decisions based upon how it feels, what it's going to mean to individuals or to groups. And we can even begin to get some cues and clues from language, and that is someone on the top half of the slide may say something like, if they're asked to make a decision, they may say something like, well, I don't think that's such a good idea. Whereas people who would be categorized in the personality types on the bottom half of the slide may say something like, I don't feel like we should do that. So there's some really good subtle cues and clues that you can begin to use in order to kind of even get a clue as to what type of personality type you're talking about. Now, since I'm positively oriented, I like to talk to people about helping people achieve things that is not within their strengths. And so sometimes we've got individuals, well, for the most part, your strength is going to be your opposite type, who is going to be catty corner from you on the screen. And that person, your strength, their weakness, their strength, your weakness. So oftentimes what we find is this is where the adversarial type relationships come into play, because we see the world 180 differently. We see it completely opposite from each other. What I like to assert is that um, begin to look at these individuals as, how can we work together? How can we collaborate? How can I utilize your strengths? How can you utilize my strengths so that we begin to have a really productive, predominantly positive working relationship. And again, this takes a little bit of practice, especially if you have a history. But I think that if we begin to really move towards that positive, we can begin to see that there's an opportunity for growth on all areas. So that being said, I want you to think about someone that perhaps you have a challenge with. And I want you to think about where they may be in terms of the quadrants. It could very well be that not only perhaps are they across from you, but they are within your same quadrant. And that's because you see the world pretty much the same. And so it's kind of the push and push and push who's going to give. Now, remember that these are just guidelines, and there's not any hard and fast science to this. Because if we have all four preferences at all times, what happens is depending upon the situation that we're in and depending upon the person that we're dealing with, we can learn to what we call adapt and connect. And adapting is when you encounter someone who perhaps has a different style preference, and you can begin to notice the cues, and then you adapt to how they like to think, like to act, like to communicate. Connecting would be if you know that you're going to go in and have a meeting with someone, and you have an opportunity then to think about, okay, how do they like to approach tasks? How do they like to communicate? And then you can stretch and you can meet their needs. So I've had people go, whoa, wait a minute now. Why am I the one that has to meet their needs? Well, you don't have to, but if we're moving towards the positive and if we're trying to get positive relationships established here, and you have this information, then it's going to be incumbent upon you to try and take it up to the next level. And as Yoda would say, there is no trying, so it's incumbent upon you to take it to the next level. So, and as we'll see later on, if we begin to encourage others and we begin to educate them, then they too can start to move in that reciprocal kind of fashion in sharing strengths. So it's important that we remember that while we have our preference, we're gonna pull on some of those other style types, regardless of whether we want to or not. Sometimes we just have to fill in with those style types. But as I said earlier, that is sometimes the major source of conflict and tension within a relationship, simply because someone doesn't see the world the way that we do. And so the other part of that is, who's your challenge person? Who is the person that you get along with the best? And these are just questions that you'll want to ask. Okay. All right. So moving on to the next uh, portion of, let's see, Ted. I've lost my navigation to move to the next slide. Ah, there we go. The next part of the process is open objectivity. So we've got P, we've got people, personality, and perception, and how our perceptions can differ. And open objectivity means that, so let's say that we're in the thick of a conflict situation, and so if we can be like a bird perched on someone's shoulder and we can actually step back from the situation and take that viewpoint of, okay, what exactly is happening here? What's going on? Let's say that someone comes into your office or you're in a group setting and you get blindsided, because that sometimes happens, right? What we need to do is just step back and take a look and see, okay, what is this person's belief? What are they bringing to the situation? What is their perception of what exactly is going on? And then it's important that you step back and say, okay, so now what is my belief, and where may we begin to see things the same, and where might we differ on things? And then from there, we extrapolate, okay, what's really important here? Because sometimes what happens is we get just stuck in the mire. We just, we're going to prove a point or whatever the case may be. But if we're really trying to move things forward, and goodness knows that we're all strapped for time, open objectivity can certainly assist us in helping to discern, okay, what's really important here. And then these are two questions. The following two questions are of supreme importance. I've used them often in my own life. In a week's time, what will this matter? In a month's time, what will this matter? 3 months' time. And I'm not saying that you should always give up what is important to you, but I do think that we need to sometimes step back and take a look at what's really the importance, what will it matter, and then after you've had an opportunity to quickly, because your less conscious will be working and it'll be drawing on everything that you've ever done, come up with, okay, so now what is it that we should do? And again, that doesn't mean that that person who gave you the blind side or who may be giving you some pushback is automatically going to come around to see your point of view. But now you've got this framework that you're working from. It's not all about ego generated what you need to do, it's about what's best for everyone who's within the situation. So we move then into the S, which is stakeholders, and ultimately, who does this involve? When I first really started contemplating this part of the concept, it was almost like an epiphany. Many of us, when we're in a conflict situation, we think I'm in conflict with just this one person. I'm having an argument. I'm having a disagreement. I'm having trouble getting them to come to terms with how I want things done. But we have to kind of pop back to open objectivity. And when we start to look at who the stakeholders are, we can begin to see that ripple effect that occurs, not just what's going to happen as a result of us really working through this conflict, but who else is impacted. So, in talking with Ted a while back, we were just a brief example was you have a conflict with someone at work. And so what happens? You end up not feeling so great. And so if you go to another meeting, perhaps you become a little withdrawn. Perhaps you go into your office and you shut your door later that day. And all of that impacts other people who need to interact with you. And people know when you're not acting like everything's okay. So perhaps there's something they want to talk to you about, but they see that you're not really where you normally are. So they may put it off, which may impact the work that's getting done with someone else. On a more personal level, if we have a conflict at work, most people drive home with that. They're driving down the road. They're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it happened." And then you might be washing the dishes and you get them really clean that night because you're scrubbing them. You're in the shower and you're talking to that person, right? So we've got to keep in mind that we sometimes bring this home, and a stakeholder there are our family members. Because when we close the door at the office, it doesn't stay shut when we get home. We oftentimes bring things home, and then the circle repeats itself home to work as well. So when you're looking at whatever conflict situation that you're in, and conflict doesn't have to be something major. It can be something that you're just thinking about, do I want to do this or do I not want to do this? Ultimately, who is involved? It's not just between you and yourself or you and another person or you and a group of people. There are other people who will be involved. Success strategies are key. Say that 6 times real fast. What types of activities need to occur in order to make the relationship successful? Okay, so you've looked at the personalities and the perception, and you've done your open objectivity, due diligence, and you're thinking, if I really want to have success with this, knowing what I know about that person, I've kind of figured out who they are and what makes them tick, what kind of activity do I need to engage in order to make it successful? What other kind of information do I need to gather? Are there other concerns that perhaps they have? Are there other people involved who maybe can shed some light on what's going on? And what kind of questions must I ask? A lot of times people want an opportunity to expound and to give more information, but we don't allow that to happen. So make sure that you ask questions, not questions that will make them feel put on the spot. And you can always preface it with something like, help me to understand. I'm trying to understand. I don't know about you, but if someone says, I'm trying to understand, as Covey said, seek first to understand, I'm a lot more open to giving information than if I'm just saying, okay, look, I don't, tell me how you feel about this, right? So, as we say, it's all in the marketing as well. So it's the language. How do I gain buy-in? Buy-in. What is it that's going to make this person want to begin to adopt either the position or my idea or whatever the case may be? And so you can look at maybe past histories. If you've done your due diligence in asking some of these other questions, you'll get some information from that. And then S is stress reductions. If I address those concerns, what is that going to do to reduce the stress? If the feeling of tension is released because the feeling of conflict is minimized, and hopefully soon we begin to see that we can agree to disagree, or we can have conversation without having conflict, then stress reduces greatly. And there's enough stress in the world without us contributing to it, right? Okay, so moving on, our next I. So we
Melinda?
talked briefly about this. Yes, yes,
Oh, just a quick question on your last session. You might
sure.
notice in the chat room there's a question about what defines success in terms of a successful relationship.
Okay, great. I'm sorry, my chat room was not feeding down, so I apologize for not seeing that. Okay, so let me back up real quick. What defines success? Well, that's for you to decide. Um, I have a saying that I use. I have lots of sayings actually. But one of them is any road will take you there if you don't know where you're going. It's kind of a paraphrase of the Cheshire Cat. And that is, if I don't know what success looks like, then I'm not going to know what, I don't know when I'm going to, when I get there. So in that open objectivity and in that information, you have to define, okay, what is success? Does it mean that we meet halfway? Do we use a collaborative approach? Is it compromise? And so I'll give up something this time, and next time they'll give up something. Um, and so it's really going to be that you have to define what that success is going to look like. And it's going to look different in different situations. Now, to further expound on that question, it's a great question. Thank you for that. Um, success, what it looks like to you may not be what success looks like to the other person. So when we talk about what questions must I ask and how do I gain buy-in, that's part of that collaborative talk where we talk about what would bring us to a win-win situation. I'm not sure that, every situation will be win-win, but we can work towards that. Does that help out? Put me a yes or a no, please. Oh, multiple attendees are typing. Okay. And I see here success is defined as no conflict or successful conflict resolution. In actuality, of course, but we're also talking about what what are we trying to reach? What is the end result we're trying to reach? So when I say whatever success becomes defined as in terms of that end point, what's the goal that you all have in mind? Yeah. All right. Okay. Good with that? Who is measuring success? Okay, so I think I addressed that, Nancy, that your success may not look the same, you and the other person. So the best approach, if you really want to reduce conflict, if you want to eliminate the conflict, is that you both define what that success would be. And that may be another part of that jockeying. Well, I think success would look like this, or I think success would look like this, or this is where I think that the relationship should go. And gang, I want to emphasize that these are 8 simple steps, but it doesn't mean that they don't take a little effort. There will be some ouch points, but if we realize that we're working towards a successful, non-conflict type of environment, then and we all agree on that, then it should help us move forward a lot more quickly. Okay, I'm gonna continue to move on if you don't mind, and certainly we can come back to that if you have more questions. go ahead and just keep those, and then we'll chat them up at the end of the presentation. I want to make sure I get through everything. Fair enough? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so I is information. Again, we assimilate all the information into what we have discerned as being openly in open objectivity, who the stakeholders are, what we think some success strategies were, and put that into some type of easily understood format or discussion. And someone had on the chat had mentioned clouds and mind mapping, ways of actually putting different portions of that conversation within those clouds. I think that's phenomenal. Whichever of those strategies works for you, I would say employ them, but make sure that you have all of your information points covered. Some people like to use bullets. Some people like to segment them by um, outcomes, interactions, whatever the case may be. So as long as you get that information into some kind of format that you are going to be able to use. You have to make sure that you have listened to the other party, because they'll want to make sure that you have what's important to them, and you'll do that because you're going to include information points that they find to be really critical. These are things that are of major concern to them, and so when you're giving them when you're getting the information about how you're actually going to approach this person, then you'll have to have all of that information. And so then one of the key things that research is coming to show to bear is imaging. And I don't care if you do it in front of a mirror. I don't care if you do it with your best friend, your husband, by yourself, but you really, not you, I'm sorry. What we're finding is that from Olympic athletes to individuals who are beating cancer, they are using imaging to do so. Um, our Olympic gold athletes will tell you that they visualize themselves either busting through the ribbon if they're racing. Michael Phelps said he would visualize every stroke that he took, what it felt like, how his lungs burned, what the exhilaration was as he reached out to touch the wall. People who are beating cancer have used the Pac-Man imaging for years. And so what happens is, remember earlier I was talking about perhaps you've had somebody that comes in and blindsides you in your office with a conflict. In actuality, how many times do you think that they've rehearsed that? I also talked about how sometimes driving in our car we're talking, we're having that conversation with them, sometimes in the shower when we're talking to our friends. Well, I would tell her this or whatever. So those are actually forms of imaging, but what we want to do is we want to move it to that positive imaging level. We've done all of this work. We have taken a look at personality and perceptions, and we've been openly objective, and then we've looked at the stakeholders and the success strategies, and we've assimilated the information. And so now what we need to do is we really need to use this when we're going to go in and have a conversation with someone. And I'll address what happens when you need to employ these techniques. Let's say it happens in the spur of the moment. You don't have the opportunity to think about all of these things when you're addressing them. So I'm going to get to that. I'm sure that's going to come up as a question. But imaging is key, because here's what happens. You can begin to think about some of the objections that may come up. How will you address them? And if you just go in blind without having given any of this any thought, then it can further exacerbate the conflict rather than move it forward. However, if you have had the opportunity to think about, or if you're looking at yourself in the mirror, body language is huge. Um, Communication is 7% about what we say, 93% about who we say it to, and what their perceptions and their interpretations of our body language are. So, being aware of our movements, could something be construed as being an affront? will help us to present ourselves in a more calm and consistent manner. The number one trait of an effective leader is the ability to remain calm. In this role, you are trying to lead yourself or other people out of a conflict situation. So you'll want to remain calm, you'll want to remain poised. And we all know that sometimes the amygdala gets hijacked and we react rather than respond, which is what intelligent human beings should do. So if we get the opportunity to image and feel it and see it and rehearse, truly rehearse how we want this positive interaction, and I cannot stress enough, you're working towards a positive outcome. It may look like, seem like, feel like, taste like, smell like another situation that you've been in the past, but this is not the same. There's a famous quote that no man enters a river the same river or the same man enters ever, because the river has changed and the man has changed each time he steps into it. So that's the same premise here, is that this imaging is going to help you to move forward. Okay, so to get back to, let's say that you get into this conflict that just automatically, bam, bam, as Emerald says, there it is. Um, Here's where the evolving comes into play. So this is the riding the bicycle part. The more you practice this, the more it becomes second nature. The more you know that, okay, wait a minute, I've got to step back. I've got to see, is this person who's lambasting me, is that really the personality of that person, or is it just the heat of the moment, or there are things going on? Or whatever their perception is it true, is it not true? How am I going to successfully communicate to them information that I have that's going to be helpful for them? So much the same as you have muscle memory. For those of you who like to golf, when you swing the club, you have the sweet spot. If you play baseball or softball, same kind of thing. Anything that you do that just comes as second nature, you just have to work for. You just have to work for incorporating this on in such a manner that it becomes almost that second nature to you. Again, not going to happen overnight, but it can happen. Okay, so next slide, Ted. I think that we have a question about. So what I'd like to see is how many of you have actually used the imaging or visualization when you've achieved something important to you. Phenomenal. See, this is another reason I love librarians and libraries. Yeah, that's good stuff. Yeah, and for those of you who have not, perhaps it's just been something that you've not been aware of, or perhaps you haven't really been exposed to the benefits of the imaging. I can tell you that when I use imaging going into a potentially conflictual type of situation, and we know when they are, we know when we're trying to present something, or when we've got a personality type who is completely different from us, or whatever the case may be. When I use that and I visualize the successful interaction, the successful conversation, it 99% of the time it actually works out that way. So it's pretty phenomenal. Let's see, not seeing the results. So Ted, can you get those up there? I will tell you that we've got 79.4% have used visualization, 20.5% have not. So about 80-20. Yeah, yeah. Great. So my challenge to you is to really begin to use this visualization. Make sure that you've defined the success. What's that going to look like? And when you use your visualization, feel it. What's it going to feel like? Perhaps you'll feel maybe a little tension when you go into it because we're a little nervous. And so I want you to actually feel, taking a deep breath and then addressing that person. You try to make the imaging as real to life as possible. And that's why it's really important also that you have either someone who's going to give you some honest feedback and be open to the feedback, right? Lean into those areas of discomfort. It's a great book, Lean In, if you haven't read it, because that's really where we grow. Perhaps we have an ouch point, but that's really where we begin to learn how we can move forward. But use the imaging. It works. It really works. And I am so excited that 80% of you all already do that. T. So T is a really, really critical step within the 8-step process. First, we're going to seek to establish trust, right? You've done everything that you need to do. You're ready to go. And so to establish trust with a person, one of the things that you can do is rather than blindside them, say, hey, Joan, I'd like to talk with you a little bit. I just want to talk with you about perhaps some differences that we may have. And I want to explore some possibilities with you. And so um, can we meet maybe around 2 this afternoon or whatever? You make it as non-combative as possible. You allow that person to not feel like they're having to put their guard up. Um, and you speak what's important to them. Now, if you've done your due diligence and all of the other things, and if you've observed this person, because we see people on a regular basis, it's rare that we have a major conflict with someone we don't know unless you're calling on phone service. That's another story. Then we know we've kind of got the patterns of those individuals, right? So here's the key: you have to talk. You have to talk to that person. You have got to have the conversation that you've rehearsed, and then you have to stop and you have to leave time for them to react or to respond. And hopefully they won't react. Hopefully they'll respond, but don't be surprised if they do react. Okay? So the transact is actually um, transacting the business. So you're talking, and so as we move into the next step, which is implement with integrity, what path are we going to take? How are we going to handle things? What's the mutual understanding that we're going to try to work towards? And so it's just like going to the bank. Until they give you the receipt, you don't know that the business has been transacted and that your money is actually in your account. And then we move into the I, which is involve and implement with integrity. And if we're going to transact, then we need to get other parties involved, whether that's an individual or whether that's that group of people. And we have to make it clear that, okay, we're moving towards success. We want to move towards success. And so this is what we're going to do. We're going to take the steps that we've discussed. We're going to implement them, and we're going to really put some positive strength around this agreement. And then when you implement it, you actually make it happen. And truly, ladies and gentlemen, what I see are the last 2 steps are the things that are often uh, you can do all the due diligence you want, but unless you actually talk and transact and then agree and implement and involve others in implementing, the process is not going to work. So I can't stress enough that while certainly all of the other information is important, you've got to actually make it happen, or else you're going to be stuck back in the conflict situation again. And so you do the agreed upon thing, and you act as everyone has agreed that they will. And then whatever task it is that you've agreed that you'll do, you do them. And my emphasis here is do them knowing that it's working towards a positive situation. Not finally, but the second to last is verify. So it's not enough to say, okay, we're going to implement these. We've got to make sure that people are really staying on track, that everything is progressing as transacted, and don't wait for the feeling that something's not right. Because if you've waited that long, if you're starting to get that ick feeling in your stomach, then that means that you should have been verifying much earlier, that you should have been taking into account that something isn't working. So if that's what's happening, if things need to be adjusted, then you go back to the talking stage. And you may want to just do a little bit more, even go back a little bit further at that than that and say, okay, um, let me see what's happening. What information do I need? All of that. But the main thing here is that you have got to maintain trust. And so we make it a collaborative effort. Hey, we're all in this together. And so let's decide what it is that we need to do in order to get back on track to make this work. And now, evolve. E, the last step is evolve. And that's exactly what will happen when you practice this process. Not going to happen overnight. Nothing, excuse me, that I know of does happen overnight. But here's some of the steps that you take. You encourage each other, and you do that very simple ways that cost you nothing but can go a long way in helping people to feel better by saying thank you. Asking how does that feel when you do that, or what do you think about the outcomes that we're getting. I tell people I feel like this is working great, and if they come back to you and they say things that well, I don't necessarily feel like this is working great, then there's a verification for you that something's out of kilter. So you go back and say, okay, what is it that we need to do? So you can see how important it is that those initial steps are really accounted for each time you move through the process. It becomes almost this circular kind of process. And then educate, because here's what's going to happen, or here's what's happened in the past when I've brought this into organizations. People begin to see that group, their productivity goes up, they begin to function better, they begin to get along better, and they're like, what's going on with you all? And so when you spread what's happening, when you educate them on the process, then it just has that natural lifting up effect. And it's fun. I'm a fun kind of gal. It's fun when you can help others to grow and learn. And after all, that's what it's all about, right? So E is evolve, and we do that through encouraging, engaging, and educating. And before I move into the next slide, I'd like to just take a couple of moments here to stop and ask if there are questions thus far, because what we're about to move into is your evolution process. It's a little homework assignment for you. Do we have any questions? Comments? Great. Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, Sarah. uh, let's see. Judy, could you please explain to me what the one-off situation? Ah, oh, that's a great question. Um, so, Judy, one of the things is if you have begun to use this process, right, then you are going to move to do whatever you feel is in the best interest of reducing the conflict. One of the things that I talk about in the book is sometimes there are going to be individuals who it doesn't matter what you do, they're going to be unhappy. They're just not going to want to seek resolution. They're not going to want to move forward with you. And to that, you have to go within and you have to say, did I do everything in my power to ensure that I gave them a positive response, that I did not contribute to the problem, but that I was more looking towards a solution to the problem? And when you do that, it's what I call being able to lay your head on the pillow at night and knowing that you've done the very best you can. And I can't overemphasize that when you're having that come to insert your name here meeting, and you say, did I really do everything that I could do to make this conflict go away or lessen or whatever, and you have done that, then that to me is positive conflict resolution as well. So you may just encounter those individuals who that's unfortunate, but it's going to happen. And um, just know that if you're working through doing the best you can with the 8 simple steps and bouncing around, because that's what's going to happen. All of a sudden, you're less conscious. Is going to say, "Oh, wait a minute, what am I supposed to do here? What's the situation?" And so that's why it's important to really practice that. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Not much time to learn and adapt. But you're doing the best you can. And gang, here's another thing that I talk to people about in my seminars. I don't know, many of you all would be if many of you all would be friends with people who um, talk to us that sometimes how we talk to ourselves. So be gentle with yourself. Be good to yourself. This conflict resolution, this process also plays with you as well, right? So go through these things, go through this step with yourself if you have a conflict with yourself, because typically that's where conflict starts. We have some sort of internal conflict, we start to feeling poorly, and then we take it out into the real world. Yeah. Oh yeah, Monica, great one. um there again, there will always be those individuals who thrive on conflict and ways to disrupt the positive environment. And if you are a manager leader, I teach this in the leadership classes, but it's also true if you're a peer, a colleague. Sometimes people, I know you're not going to believe this, but if I had time to go through the model, I could explain it. Sometimes people really aren't aware. They are just being who they're being. And what happens is no one ever steps up to the plate to tell that person, when you exhibit this behavior, here is what happens. Now we think they know. We think, oh my gosh, they know. They should know. But um, in actuality, uh, people are just being who they are. Your personality is formed by the time that you're 9 years of age. And so, however you've been acting, I don't know how old you are, subtract 9 from that. And that's how you've been getting your needs met. If you are a happy person, then people love to see you coming. If you're a negative person who's sick, somebody's always out to get them, but somehow or other you've been getting attention as a result of that, that's how you're going to get your needs met. And so here's one other thing that around positive conflict resolution there, and again, it's back to you. And I have a saying that Dr. Phil stole from me, but I'm gonna let him have it because he's much bigger than I am. And that is, you teach people how to treat you. So while we can't control how an individual may interact with a lot of other people, we can control how they interact with us. And if I allow a person to continually be angry with me, be mad at me, talk down to me, have conflict situations with me, then that's my fault, because it is my responsibility to say, I am not going to be a party to that any longer. Now, I'm willing to work with you, but I can't work in an environment where everything is negative. And these are things, we have role plays, we have a whole actual afternoon of where we go through conversations in the workshops. I apologize, there's just not much time in an hour to cover everything, but I'll do the very best I can. Um, let's see. Yeah. So sometimes we just have to tell people when their amygdala is hijacked, let's regroup. I understand that this makes you angry. And so let's regroup in about 30 minutes. And I believe it was Sarah who had typed, really, you give people a chance. When your amygdala gets hijacked, it takes 20 minutes for it to calm down with no further stimulation. So you don't want to let time go by, too much time go by, but so you want to address things as quickly as possible, but you do want people to have the ability to calm down, and you want to be calm too. And within that 30 minutes, you can take that time and run through the process and kind of figure out how you're going to best allay the situation. Yeah. Yeah, Tanya, that's great. What you allow is what will continue. Very good. Yeah. All right. Anything else, gang? No other questions? We're going to move on to what I'd love to have you all try as a result of the as a result of this webinar. Okay, relationships rule. It's true. Everything we do is based upon relationships. And we're at work more than we are anywhere else. We don't sleep as much as we're at work. We don't get to spend as much time with our family as we do when we're at work. So that's incumbent upon you to really focus on those relationships within work, so you can get that quote unquote work life balance. And make relationships work for you. Gang, really, it's all about you. That's my next book. It's all about you. And it is about what can you do when you become your authentic self. And this is highlighted at the end of The Power of Positive Conflict Resolution. When you become your authentic self, then you have the freedom to be who you are, and people know what to expect from you, and they have the freedom to be their authentic self too. So make relationships work for you. And so work, home, stop the madness, stop bringing negative situations to each place, and start the positivity. I'm starting a positive evolution. So I want you all to join that with me, that positive evolution. All right, so here's your evolution steps. I want you to think about your personality type. If you've got a sorry about that, that's my helper. If you've got an assessment that you use, go back and review it and think about really what does that mean for you. Now here comes the fun part. You're going to ask 3 people for feedback about you. 2 you can ask that know and love you and are going to give you all the good stuff, but you really want to not try, you really want to ask someone with whom you've experienced some conflict. Well, why do we want to do that? Because we need to lean into that discomfort and we need to see how we're being perceived by other individuals. We sometimes have blind spots that we don't recognize. And so, if we can do that, and yes, it's going to take a little bit of courage and stepping up to the plate, but boy, your trust and respect level will probably go way up. And the top 3 things in life that people want, according to a Gallup survey, is love, trust, and respect. If I trust you, I respect you. If I respect you, I trust you. And from there, love follows. Not necessarily romantic love, but love. So I want you to think about who you're going to ask and by when. And don't put this off. Do it within the next week, the next 2 weeks at a maximum, and really begin this evolution series for yourself. And I know that you all will do it because just like that 80-20 breakdown of the visualization, you guys are just incredible when it comes to learning and leading and assimilating things into your life that make a difference. So, what do you ask about? You ask, how do you perceive me? You ask them for your strengths, but you also ask them what areas that you can improve upon. And then you throw in this zinger, what is it that you'd like to know about me? And you have to be open to giving them the information that they need. Okay? And here's the thing, you're going to have to make sure that you give them, you don't want to blindside them for this either, because they're going to be like, okay, what's going on here. Define what you're going to say to encourage them to tell, the conversation may sound something like this. I'm trying to grow and I'm trying to learn, and I'm trying to put the onus on me. I'm trying to develop this positivity model, and so I'd like to spend some time with you, and I'd like to get some input from you about me, and I really want to know the good, the bad, the indifferent. I really would like to get some honest and open information from you. And so then you schedule the conversation so you can get that face to face feedback. It's too easy to get the written, and if they live in another country, that's fine. Or if that's all you can do, but I truly encourage the face to face so you can get the body language and the tonality and what's happening. And just let them know, maybe this is going to be a little bit of stressful, but it's going to be a growth opportunity, both for me and for you. And then when you're in the conversation, all you want to do is be present and listen. You don't want to push back or defend yourself, because then what that does is that immediately shuts down that open and honest communication. And you've already told them, you've laid the groundwork that I'm going to give you an opportunity and I really want to hear what you have to say. If there's something that you've done, And remember, this goes back to ownership when we were in open objectivity. And I said, you really need to take ownership for those things that you have done. If you feel like you have, that's about the only time you're going to open your mouth. Otherwise, no pushback. I apologize if I hurt your feelings. I apologize if that bothered you. And then after you listen to them and you're taking your notes, you thank the person for being open and honest. And then it doesn't end there, of course. You follow up with them about what it is that you've learned after you've done this point, which is the self reflection. I figured out that there's around 249,000 plus minutes in 6 months. And I typically ask how many of you have spent 15 minutes within the last 6 months doing some self reflection. Again, it's my librarians who always raise their hand and say that they've done that. Most people, though, in a crowd of between 30 and 50, I may have 2 to 3 people raise their hand. This is critical. Any road will take you there if you don't know where you're going. We spend more time planning a vacation than we do planning our own lives. So I'm going to challenge you to do that self reflection, to spend the time alone, identify those 2 to 3 areas of improvement that maybe someone has given you, and then also think about, okay, if there were strengths, what was verified for you? And here's another thing: own your strengths. You've got gifts that you're bringing to the world. Bring them, let them shine. People are depending upon you. So, whatever is verified, whatever is clarified, go with it. What's surprising? People may tell you things that are really great that, maybe you've not given much thought to. Own those wonderful things. And what was disappointing, don't wallow in it. Just think about, what is it that I can do to make it better? And then finally, the growth comes, growth in relationships grow when people do. And it's incumbent upon you to be, as Gandhi said, the change that you want to see in the world. Strengthen the areas for improvement. I'm sorry, that should be for improvement. And continue to improve the areas that you're already working on. For those of you who can get access to Strengths Finder, the book, I highly encourage you to take that. It'll identify your top 5 strengths and begin to play to those. Talk openly with people who were helpful to you. Again, this is where you go back and you say thank you, and you tell them what's happening and what's going on. So, all of that being said, I think that we are just about at the end. I would really appreciate it if you have any questions that you could go ahead and type them now. If you have feedback for me, if you would shoot me a line at melinda.stallings@gmail, I would appreciate it. There's my website. I'm at The Positive Coach. It's POSTIVE on Twitter. I'd appreciate you following me. But in the meantime, while we still have a little bit of time, if you have some questions or concerns, go ahead and type them in, and we will address those in as much time as I have. And Ted, I don't have a clock here, so can you tell me how much time we do have?
We don't actually. We're about 3 minutes
Out of
over
time?
time.
I'm
But
sorry. Okay.
I had already let the audience know that we will go ahead and send the recording. So I think those who can stay are of course welcome to stay, and if you can't stay, we will share the recording with you after we're done, so you'll still get to hear the answers to the questions in the end of the program. I also
Oh,
want to point
perfect.
out for someone who asked for CE credit, just go back to the same website where you registered, www.txla.org/CE. And there you'll see the button in the top left corner that says registration and CE certificates. And you click that button, it'll take you to a menu where you can pick this program and process and print your CE certificate at your convenience. So just going through some of the questions, we had one early on as people are typing these in. Early on there was a bit about understanding others' beliefs, and Jeannie Stanley was asking, how do you understand beliefs without making assumptions, since you usually just have a few
Uh,
clues?
that's a great question. And Jeannie, will you all excuse me just one moment? Sorry.
And that would probably be the dog. Um, and
I needed to
she,
go outside and chase a squirrel.
squirrel.
He's got his own conflict resolution to deal with out there. So that's a great question, Jeannie. And that's where the conversation comes in. That's where the talking and the transacting comes in. You know what your beliefs are. We're not always aware of another person's beliefs, and oftentimes they just don't even get an opportunity to really tell us what their beliefs are. Um, and I think that we all are, we all make assumptions about what a person's beliefs are. And I don't know about you all, but sometimes I've been wrong about what their beliefs are. And I won't ever know their beliefs until I begin to have that conversation with them and ask them. And one of the ways that I like to start those conversations out, a couple of people have said, I need some examples. One of the ways that I start the conversation is, Jim, I just want to talk with you a little bit about, what my beliefs are surrounding this. And I want to get your beliefs surrounding this as well, because I know what I think and I know what my beliefs are, but I really truly don't know what yours are, and I want to honor those. Using positive language really helps people lay their guard down. And again, it becomes things that you have to do with practice. And again, it's things that are covered in a seminar, but and in the book as well. Um, but you begin to just really make it okay for people to share. See, here's what I've noticed, that in our lifetime, as we age and we become adults, there's this magic cutoff age where we can't ask questions anymore. I don't know what that age is, but it's like we're supposed to know everything. And so we either don't assert ourselves to ask a question, or we don't allow other people to ask questions because we're too busy or whatever. And so one of the things that I constantly talk about is make it okay for people not to know. And so when I make it okay for me not to know, then I am giving someone else permission not to know. And I don't have to expressly say that. It's just inherent in that interaction then, that, oh wow, Melinda doesn't know everything either. And here I am, I'm thinking that she's got all the answers for everything. None of us have all the answers for everything. So when we get on that level playing field, and we do that by that talking and transacting.
Melinda, there was
Jeannie.
an earlier question from Amy about a rubric for the questions. And I was good.
Rubric about the questions. Oh,
And I've brought us back to the questions. One person asked if they could see them again.
okay, there you are. I'm sorry, the rubric about which questions?
These
Shelley.
questions that are on the screen now,
Oh,
are there answers that you're looking for?
um, anything that's going to help you grow. If you're having a situation, okay, here's an example. So you are a big, bold, challenging red energy person. You take charge of projects. You like to get things done. So you come across perhaps as being direct and abrupt. That's typically what we get from people. And so um, when you ask someone, how do you perceive me? Now, you don't want to lead them, right? But you can say, how do you perceive me? And if they kind of start tiptoeing around, you can offer up something like, well, someone else has described me as being too abrupt. How do you feel about that? Or what do you think about that? And so you see, then you've given someone else, and you always want to ask first without giving them an example from someone else. But if they're struggling, because we have to remember, conflict is something that no one likes. Even if we're giving them an in, even if we're saying, I'm trying to grow, I'm trying to take this to the next level, some people are still going to be reticent about moving into that conflict, mini conflict situation of telling you exactly what it is that I need to know, right? So, what are my strengths? I really want to know, what is it that you like about me? What do you see that I bring into the workplace that people really respond to, or that what are some of the things that I do that help you? When you can begin to really tie it into that person that you're talking with, then it becomes more of the, okay, now we're moving on to that level playing field. Don't forget, you're going to have my apologies to Dan's and Nans, but you've got negative Nan and downer Dan sometimes, right? And so they may say, well, I don't see any strengths in you. And then the conversation, well, has there ever been anything that I've done that has been of assistance in some small way that you can see? And again, it's going to be it's going to be the practice situation. It's going to be learning the language, how to use the language, and how you can move through those things. What are areas I can improve upon? This is one where you might get a lot of information because everybody always thinks that everyone else can improve, right? We have ideas about how another person can improve, and even if you don't agree, check your body language. Don't start to tense up. Don't start to stiffen up. Oh, thank you. Just take the notes down, right? Because you're going to go back and self reflect on this. And then the what do you want to know? You just ask them. Is there anything that you're curious about me? Is there anything that you'd like to know about things, not personal, but about anything else? And so then you've got a little bit more of a basis for how you can work with that individual. Is that helpful? Let's see, who was this that was asking this question?
Oh, that was Amy, and I think she said thank you, so I think she may have had to sign off.
Yeah,
Um,
no
we,
worries.
we are uh, well beyond our time now, so I'm going to have to wrap us up here. But thank you all for your questions. We so appreciate all of you joining us today. Thank you, Melinda. This was a great presentation.
My
I
pleasure. It's really my pleasure. I just want to add that the website is in its infancy. I have a couple of typos and a couple of things that need to be fixed, so please uh, bear with me. It's just been up in the last week and a half, and so we're working through that. But thank you so very much. And if you would send me feedback, I would be so grateful for that. And Ted, it's been a real honor to work with you, and I really appreciate everyone's time, talents, and energies here today.
It's been great working with you too, Melinda. And we will also be sharing an evaluation survey online when we send out the recordings, and we'll be sure to share the results of that with you. As people go, I want to also remind people that there are 4 other webinars coming up in May and June from TLA. We have Organizing Friends of School Libraries on May 7th, on May 15th, Adding Diversity and Inclusion to Your Strategic Planning Process. On May
Welcome.
20th, Workforce Development in Libraries, our big workforce initiative. And then in June, Serving All Citizens, the Target Language Initiative from our friends at Multnomah County. Thank you all. Thank you again, Melinda. This has been a terrific webinar. And
Great.
we hope you have a great weekend and that we can work again with you soon.
Thank you. Love and light, everyone. Best of everything to you.